Welcome to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibility Man. We're committed to bringing you guests who strive to better people's lives and serve as a force for good in the world. Our guest today is Dr. Lisa Collins. She is an educator and consultant who strives to foster well-being in communities and organizations in the United States. She shared her journey of racial healing in a well-received TEDx Talk and is passing on her discoveries with others. Lisa advocates for equity and environmental justice and is the author of Love of Light, a guide to peace and oneness. Lisa, welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate that. But I want to make this announcement to our listeners and our viewers. Follow, like, and share this podcast wherever you find it. Your support matters and is appreciated. Lisa, people don't really understand that they can be a part of the success of this podcast if they like the content. Hit that notification bell, share, follow, let someone else know what's happening here. Lisa, where are you in the world today?
Today I'm in Portland, Oregon.
Portland, Oregon. Wow. Isn't the internet wonderful? We are connected as if we are in my living room having this conversation on video. Isn't that amazing?
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. Hey, this is one of the most important conversations I've had with any guest since I started doing this work almost 3 years ago. And if I seem a little nervous or get a little nervous, be patient with me, because I really want this to serve people who listen or people who watch this video. But first, I want us to get to know you a little better. Now, you are an educator, aren't you?
I am an educator. I started as a teaching assistant, and then I became a teacher leader, an administrator. Then I worked in the district office in public education, and now I'm an assistant professor at a local college.
Oh, I love your path, your journey. I mean, look, this is the Possibility Action Network. And I love what you said. You started as an assistant and you slowly moved up the ladder, and now a doctorate in education and a professor. That's an amazing journey. Did you see it coming when you were an assistant? Did you see yourself sitting in the chair that you sit in now?
I did not. I did not see it coming. It's just, I just followed the path that as a door opened, I just kept saying yes and walking through. And I loved education. I loved the ability to influence our young people and to influence adults into bringing more positive light into the world.
I love that. And yeah, so where do you think this inspiration came from, that you would be an educator and for now, a long time educator? Where was this coming from for you? Your parents, mother, father?
I don't, I don't know, but I want to say my grandparents. My grandfather was a sharecropper. He was a sharecropper until he could earn enough money to buy his own land. And my grandmother, I spent summers on the farm. And there's something in me, which I hope that are in other people, like the lineage and legacy of who I am. And that pride, I think, helped push me forward. And of course, my parents always encouraged me to try. If nothing else, try.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think almost every family can look at their family history and find that type of example where people who faced a lot of adversity, but yet managed to do well. So we want to talk about, Lisa, this difficult subject, an important subject of trauma. A lot of people are talking about it today, but we want to hear from you. What is trauma? Help us understand what that is.
Yeah, trauma is tricky because we think It comes from the medical field originally, and we think it's like big, big things. But actually, trauma happens in the body. It's the body's way of protecting us. And we're not running from animals. We're living in a Western society. Most of us are some kind of metropolitan society, or maybe even rural society, where we don't need to be jumping at every minute, but our body, if it senses danger based on the body's experience, it will respond, and that is trauma.
Uh-huh. Do you think society today, in this 2024, in case you're listening to this like 10 years from now in 2034, do you think people are trauma aware, especially in the Western world and perhaps elsewhere on the planet?
I don't think so. I have a book coming out in the spring that is the truth about trauma and how to
Oh,
break patterns and live in joy. And so I think people think that that's someone else's problem. I thought that was someone else's problem. Everything I've learned through my own experience. I
uh-huh.
thought that doesn't apply to me.
Yeah.
I can help
But
other people with that.
uh-huh. But if you live on planet Earth, would you say that it's more likely than not that a person at some point in life will have a trauma experience?
Yes, yes, yes. You
Yeah.
can have a trauma experience walking to your front door. You can have, I
Mm,
mean, when your body is talking to you, what we have learned in the Western society is to ignore. The body
yeah.
keeps a score. The body tells us when we need to pay attention, but
Yeah.
often we will ignore those feelings.
Yeah. A physician drew our attention to childhood trauma back in the day. And I think he developed a study called ACE, Adverse Childhood Trauma. Can you help us understand what that is?
Absolutely. The
Mhm.
ACEs questionnaire was developed in San Diego by at Kaiser actually, and
Uh-huh.
people came in and took a questionnaire. 17,000 people actually came in and took a questionnaire, and what they found is if certain things had happened to them in childhood abuse, verbal, mental, physical abuse, psychological abuse, someone in the home being physically or mentally, psychologically, sexually abused,
Mhm.
someone being incarcerated, divorce. Um, what else is there? Um, Moving, different things. There's a criteria. And when you take the questionnaire, how many you get out of 10
Mhm.
is your score. The higher the score, the more inclination that you will experience later hardships, physical hardships in life based on the adverse childhood experiences that occurred in your life.
Yeah, and I want to underscore this, for our parents or any adult who is listening or watching, this has been documented, hasn't it, that if things happen
Well
like this, yeah,
documented.
mhm,
And I
yeah,
personally have taken the questionnaire. And
uh-huh,
again, glibly feeling like this is for other people, and I
yeah,
scored 8 out of 10.
wow, woo, okay,
That was
that says a
overwhelming.
lot.
Yeah.
We've been probing to that a little more. I want to read something for you that was stated by Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, who founded the Center for Youth Wellness, and she's the former Surgeon General of California. I
Yeah.
want to read this,
Amazing.
and I want you
Yeah.
to kind of help us understand this. I want to work with this a little bit. Are you game?
Oh, absolutely. I love her work.
Okay. Okay. Here's what she says: childhood trauma increases the risk for 7 out of 10 leading causes of death in the United States. In high doses, it affects brain development, the immune system, hormonal systems, and even the way our DNA is read and transcribed. Folks who are exposed in very high doses have triple the lifetime risk of heart disease and lung cancer, and a 20-year difference in life expectancy. What do you make out of that, Dr. Collins?
I'm a living witness. Um, what happens is, Hebb's axiom says what fires together wires together and therefore survives together. And so an experience that happens in childhood, let's just say, and I'll give an example from adulthood. I was out with someone and they touched me here. They just kind of grabbed me on the arm and I said, don't ever touch me like that again, and
Wow.
put my
Yeah.
hand up. Where did that come from? That overreaction. What we usually do is we just say, oh, it's nothing. Well, apparently, I didn't remember, but my body remembers when someone grabbed me there. Now I'm an adult and I'm like, don't you ever. That is how childhood trauma shows up, and it's invisibilized inside of our body systems. We think those reactions are ours, and actually, they were put in our bodies by experiences long before any of us could speak up for ourselves.
Uh-huh. And I mean, this is a message for parents and adults and anyone who works with young people, is that childhood trauma is real and they have consequences. Now, I want to drive this a little farther. So, if childhood trauma is real, Dr. Collins, clearly childhood racialized experiences or trauma experiences must also be real.
Oh, absolutely. Now, we don't want to really talk about racial trauma. No one knows how to handle or talk about race, period. So
Yeah.
racial trauma is very, very scary. I created a tool that captures trauma, experiences of trauma, including race, and it scares people to think about measuring racial trauma. Racial trauma with children, there was a study of teachers, new teachers, and they were asked to watch these pre-Ks, little ones, and look for the bad kids, look for the
Mm-hmm.
kids that cause trouble. And in the research, the camera was on the teacher's eyes, and the eyes were to the children with dark skin.
Yeah.
So much of that internalized oppression that we all
Mm-hmm.
live in comes out through the body. And racial
Yeah.
trauma to children in ways seen and unseen,
Uh-huh.
said and unsaid.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, I'm glad you mentioned the schools, because when you think about racial trauma, then the question becomes, where is this happening? Where is this taking place? And you just gave us one of those places, and that is the schools, teachers, administrators, and the relationship with children. So, okay, let's say that's one. What's another place that racial trauma may emanate from that affects children?
In your community.
Yeah.
So basically, one of the things that I've identified is walking down the street.
Uh-huh.
I'm walking down the street. I'm sharing the sidewalk with my neighbors. And what I have seen in some communities is that I'm invisibilized, that
Mm,
you will walk through me. You will walk right up to me. And children also feel this. They're
yeah.
and they don't count. They don't matter. They may be standing someplace, an adult walk right in front of them or almost stand on top of them. This
Yeah.
form of invisibilization, you don't matter, you
Uh-huh.
don't count,
Yeah.
happens
Yeah.
without any words in our communities.
That's right. And it's an energy. And not only do people who are I don't like the word minority group, but people who are of color, and other individuals, it seems like there are messages that are being transmitted that are not even spoken, as you've just said. And people can actually feel that. Yeah.
That is quite the thing, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what got me into energy medicine, because I didn't believe in
Uh,
energy medicine before. I said,
huh.
"What's that? That I don't I
Yeah.
don't I don't understand that." Well, how many times does a child come up and say, that person doesn't like me? I don't
Yeah.
feel
Uh,
right in here. Or how many times does an adult not feel like, I don't like it here? Well,
yeah.
we can feel the energy and we have
Mhm.
to acknowledge it. It is
Yeah.
real. We
Yeah.
have to acknowledge that Dr. King was very clear. We
Mhm.
want to transform. that energy.
Indeed, indeed. So we've listed two. If you're listening or watching, schools, be aware, racial trauma can come from, happen there. Your community. I want to throw some things out at you, Dr. Collins, and see whether you think these are other places where we need to at least be aware of racial trauma. And I would ask you, what about the media? Do you think we should need to be concerned about the media?
I made a face because the media is absolutely the worst.
Uh,
The absolute worst. When I was raising my children, I didn't allow them to watch television. They picked shows that they would watch. Why? Well, as a single mom at that time, I knew the messages that were transmitted through the TV shows and even the commercials. So
yeah.
our children are being, I get given a practical example. We were, my little guy, who's not so little anymore, we were watching a show. I won't name the show for
Mhm.
your benefit.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
name the show all the time.
Hmm.
And in the show, the black baby was barking like a dog and chasing the white baby. And I stopped the
Mm.
TV and I said to my son, Andrew, what's happening? And
Mm.
he said, I don't know. I said, what's the black baby doing?
Mm.
Acting like a dog. And
Mm.
who are they chasing? Well, they're chasing the
Yeah.
baby that's white. I said, what does
Yeah.
that say about black people, dark-skinned
Yeah.
people? We stopped
Yeah.
watching the show.
Hmm. Yeah. That's a good one. And if you are a person of a certain age, no matter what group you belong to, and look at some of those old shows from the late 50s and 60s, early years of television,
Edie
you would
Gonzalez,
think you would think that only one group of people lived on the planet because other
only
people are
one
just.
group matters,
That's right.
according to our media.
Yeah, yeah. Let me ask you this one. This is a tough one, but I gotta ask you. We're talking about racial trauma in our children, and I'm just wondering, what about law enforcement? Can children be traumatized from law enforcement without having committed a crime and being put in jail, but just traumatized?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah,
law enforcement, they carry weapons.
yeah.
Um, and weapons are seen as a source of power. We've
Hmm.
seen that in violent crime, right? And
Yeah,
so when
yeah.
children are intimidated by, and I think Dr. Muhammad Khalifa shows
Mm.
a video that is so pertinent where the child is being accosted by the police,
Hmm.
not being treated as a human being.
Yeah.
When he starts to cry, told not to cry.
Mm.
This these ways to use the body and to superimpose dominance and
Yeah.
power over children is very painful and very traumatic.
Right. I think, I don't know. I'm not, you've studied this and written about this. I think the two things seem to be happening here. One is that the person who are in certain groups, may feel empowered when they deal with people who they feel don't have any power. And they seem more confident in acting out against those people. Is there something like that?
Absolutely. We know that the way that the United States and many other countries were conquered or
Mm.
colonialized, that you take on the norms, the values, the tenets of the person who empowered or
Mm.
took over that country. And through that is the same power that I'll give you another example.
Mhm.
I was in Indiana. I was at a national park and there was a little boy, Caucasian little boy with his mom who was at the back of their vehicle, but the boy was way into the street, way into the
Mm.
to the parking lot because he can.
Mm.
They're taught at a very
Mm.
young age. You can be
Yeah.
way in the middle of the parking lot. Everything
Right.
waits for you. No
Yeah.
one, you own that power. So that is being taught at a very, very young age.
Mm.
Another example is a little girl, a Caucasian little girl who says hi to a nice black lady who's standing near her at the counter
Mm.
line at the grocery store. The
Uh-huh.
dad ignores the little girl engaging with the nice black woman,
Yeah.
a nice white woman comes up, oh, look at look at the pretty woman, she's
Yeah.
talking to you. We
Uh,
teach, we teach from a very
yeah.
young age. So that empowerment is not even
Yeah.
conscious. It's a
Right.
subconscious empowerment too.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're really inviting people to be aware, be aware of what's happening in our society. Okay. So those things are happening. How can parents who have children who may be in environments that may cause them racial trauma, how can those parents help with those children how can they better protect those children is what I'm trying to get at.
That is a really, really good question. I think the
Mm,
first thing that all people can do, especially parents for children, is teach them how to connect to their body.
mm,
Because the body does keep the score. The body is telling you when something is unsafe.
yeah.
And when they teach the children how to connect to their body, to listen to their body and to come to them, what I mentioned, I started talking to my son at a very young age. He's a
Wow.
biracial boy. He's a Black boy. I started talking to him about society at a very
Uh,
young age so he would know, and then so he would come to me. So
yeah.
I want to foster this idea of helping children realize who they are,
Yeah.
not in a negative sense, in a
Uh,
powerful sense, right? The
indeed.
lineage,
Indeed. Yeah.
and then also to
Mhm.
listen to their bodies and
Mhm.
recognize what I say a lot to my students is I need you to see oppression.
Yeah.
I need you to see it. So if something is happening, not to ignore it, but
Mhm.
parents have to also see their own. You
Indeed.
can't help
Yeah.
something that you haven't looked at yourself. So to be
Mhm.
able to recognize in your own body. And I
Yeah.
would say for my book, Love of Light, find community of like-minded people
Mhm.
so that you
Yeah.
would have
Yeah.
that community that we used to have in church, but
Yeah.
that's not quite there like it used to be.
Right. And I'm going to come back to that, but you said something very important about your son. I remember when one of my boys was young, maybe third grade or whatever. One of his teachers, this was a smart kid, is a smart man now. One of his teachers was with him in a certain way, and he reported that he felt creepy. He just felt, I think he said it made my skin crawl. And we had to talk to the principal about it. But the teacher spoke with him in a way that his body registered that this person was not being friendly to me, just like you're reporting. So, I mean, I said all of that to say you're right. I think parents need to be aware because they're in a position to talk with the child to help protect the child.
And they're not making it up, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Mm.
often kids will say, that teacher doesn't like me, or
Yeah.
they'll come back and you're like, well, what did they do?
Yeah.
Did they do anything? We have to
Mhm.
acknowledge those feelings are facts. And
Yeah.
my middle boy, I remember him in the sixth grade, little guy, he wore glasses and he had a
Mm.
huge teacher, was like 6 foot, a Caucasian
Wow.
male he ended up yelling at my son and saying, do you want to jump on me? What?
Mm.
Where did that
Wow.
come from? He's less than
Mhm.
5 feet tall. But you see what that
Yeah.
incident around black males.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
something about my son's power
Mm.
at that age scared this man.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I tell you, it's important to be aware. And we're talking about what parents and adults and other trusted adults. You mentioned early on, when I was growing up, heck, the village raised me. It wasn't just my parents, it was my neighbor, my cousin, my uncle, all of them. So trusted parents are important for sure. And you also did, I think you mentioned relationships or community. You didn't mention that. Tell us a little more about the importance of community in trying to foster a sense of protection and safety for our children who may be exposed to racialized trauma.
We need safe places to go, and we
Mm-hmm.
need like-minded people. There's a
Yeah.
lot out there. If you just look at any of the media, like there's very dark themes of media,
Mm-hmm.
and very dark, a lot of darkness. But I'll say that the light conquers the dark always. So we need
Yeah.
other light-minded people to be around our children. If they can't come to us, that they can go to someone else that is in the community. That's what that
Yeah.
community that's what it does.
Yeah.
My heritage has always had community. We
Yeah.
had community to survive. We had
Got to.
community
Yeah.
before we got robbed and brought over
Mm,
here and kidnapped.
mm,
That community is vital, but
mhm.
not in a negative sense, in a positive sense. So we need to
Wow.
look past the worldly strife to bring the core of goodness.
Mhm.
The African different themes around Kwanzaa, bring the core of the goodness of who we are and surround ourselves by people like that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And we're really talking about how do we keep our children safe. If we know that trauma is a thing, we know that racial trauma is a thing. And the question becomes how to kill. Do you think, children also experience stress, don't we? Sometimes when I hear people talk about the subject, it's like toxic stress, and people are thinking adults, but kids also can feel toxic, have toxic stress, correct?
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah,
school can be really stressful.
yeah,
I was a special education teacher, a master's in special education,
uh,
and also licensure in general education. And
yeah.
when children come to school, the structures that we put in place for them institutionalize them.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Geneva Gay talks about, we're standing in a group talking to our friends. No, you must line up. The things
Yeah.
that, so I lose myself through the education system. I lose who I am
Mm,
because I must do what the structures say. And I think
mhm.
that's hard for children. You will see children who come in at kindergarten, pre-K, kindergarten,
Yeah.
by third grade, our Black males are disengaged.
Wow. Mm, yeah. I tell you, awareness. Well, I think someone might have said knowledge is power. So we're being aware, gain knowledge, and you'll know how to better protect our kids. So, in terms of diffusing stress, do you think play is important for our children? I know we're in a high tech age now. There are, TV screens everywhere. But do you think play is still important in keeping our children healthy?
Absolutely. Play is vital. It is
Mm,
vital for adults and children,
yeah.
and not being attached to these screens. And
Yeah.
screens do give off energy, so does electronics. And so some
Mm,
people are very affected by the energy of the cell phone. And so also there are protections to protect children and adults from those energies as well. But
yeah.
definitely being in nature, being
Hmm.
in nature is
Being in
healing.
nature. I mean, growing up, I grew up in the country. Heck, nature was where we lived. It's
That's
always
right.
around us.
That's
I
right.
think you're right. Yeah. But what about parents being intentional about telling their kids, "I love you. I'm proud." What do you think about that
Well,
in
I didn't
terms
grow up
of
with that.
neutral?
I
You
didn't
did
grow
or
up with
did not?
that. I
Okay.
did not. So when
Okay.
you think about when I went back and I started doing the healing that I've done, I
Uh,
started looking at where did my parents come from? Where did
yeah.
their parents come from? This ability to be able to express
Mm,
in a positive way. I think Joy DeGeary talks about in her book, Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome. She talks about
mm,
some of the things that have come forward from slavery that are not necessarily positive things.
mm.
So what I did with my children is I I always told them I love them. I spent
That's
time with
wonderful.
them, getting to
Yeah.
know each and every one of them. I would take them out
Mm,
on little dates and tell them and do whatever they wanted to do. And I
yeah.
wanted to establish this relationship that's different than what my parents did. And I'm sure they did something that was different than what their parents did.
Indeed, growth for sure. And that's why I wanted to talk with you. The moment I heard your TED Talk, when I'm going to talk to you about TED Talk later, I want to talk with you about that because it seems to me that you're also saying, to recognize that this thing exists, but there are things we can do to buffer, to safeguard. And in this case, I want to emphasize safeguarding our children now. But I want to hear I just love the way you presented your TED Talk. I mean, I just loved it. So I want to hear your story. Share your story with us, and then slowly walk us through your story of healing.
Oh, wow. I'm so grateful for the ability to be able to draw a free breath, to feel
Mm,
free in my life. And it wasn't like that. I'm a long-term educator. I was working in education, and Education is a mission-driven organization that's for our children. And that was my calling for sure, still is. And I fought for kids who were underserved, kids who were unrepresented. And it seems the harder I fought, the harder I was defeated. And I could not figure out why. Then I started experiencing racialized trauma. And racialized trauma can be overt or covert, but I really experienced the you wouldn't believe it kind of racial trauma. And I would go home and I would go to my elders and try to get help. And they would say, oh, it's going to be okay. That person's going to leave, or it's all right. And something in me said, my grandfather was a sharecropper. He did this for me. He fought for me. No.
Yeah.
And what I started studying was I started studying trauma. I became a trauma practitioner first. So I became a practitioner of the strategies for trauma awareness and resilience. And anyone who wants to start someplace, I highly recommend you start there.
Okay.
It is based out of the Center for Justice and Peace Building. And it came about from 9/11. A bunch of peace builders got together and Carolyn Yoder wrote this model, which is fantastic. My model is on top of this model.
Okay.
And so I started experiencing things and started experiencing work. And what I did is I studied my lived experience in 3 educational organizations. And what I found is I experienced racial trauma 4 times more than healing. I had no idea I was going to find that. It blew my socks off. And as I was writing this dissertation, I was also seeking healing. I went to a life coach, and then she taught me how to look in the shadow. She taught me about the connection of the body. And then another practitioner came around, all black support for people who worked and provided mental health services. Then I learned about interpersonal neurobiology, and I incorporated all of these things into a healing model based on STAR on how to heal racial trauma. Did I know I was going to heal racial trauma? Absolutely not. I was just looking and seeking myself. And through doing that, I picked up all of these tools. And what I found out was in order to heal my racial trauma, I had to go back and heal my childhood trauma.
Wow.
That had to be the foundation. And then I could build from there. And I want you to think about for a second, when we have experiences at work or in an organization around racialized trauma, and someone hasn't done their previous work, it gets very messy. And it's like throwing something in the back of the station wagon. And when the station wagon stops, all the stuff comes forward. That's what happens. And that's why our DEI work is messy. It's messy because we don't know what trauma we're addressing.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not
I think you're
sure.
right. I'm with you there. In fact, that's what I love about your work is that you offer this hope of personal, not only healing, but empowerment. It's like you don't have to be a victim. You don't have to live as a victim.
No.
And that doesn't mean letting other people off the hook, but certainly
No.
you don't have to be a victim. Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things I learned is I learned who I was, where I came from, and whose I was. I didn't have what I call racial consciousness. I didn't know about settlers colonialism. I didn't know my ancestral knowledge. And by me knowing all of those things, it helps me navigate the systems that I live in. And that's what I want for people. You don't have to be a victim of the system. I don't need you to be Braveheart and go running, screaming into organizations, but I need you to see like, oh, yes, I see that.
Yeah.
And
I love it. Yeah. I love it. So if you were to build, okay, I'm going to make you're the queen of the land.
I like this
And
idea.
you've been invited to build a framework to foster healing and empowerment for people who have experienced trauma and also racial trauma. What would you do?
Well, I've done it. I
Okay.
have a framework that is based on STAR. So the first
Okay.
thing I would do is I'd have people recognize when they were in the cycles of trauma response. And once you recognize that, you have to be able to connect to your body. Once you recognize the cycles, you need to break free. How do you break free? We've talked about this in our conversation, a healing community of support, a place where you go and you tell people and they're able to support you. They're not going to dismiss what you're saying. They're not going to tell you Tom's a nice guy. They're just going to actually support you. Then you're going to move into acknowledgement. This comes off the STAR model. You're going to acknowledge what happened. You're going to go into mourning, grieving. You're going to memorialize. You're going to connect your body and brain connection to, in my case, spirituality is always part of it. I'm connecting all the way around the healing. Then when you come out of acknowledgement, you're going to get into reconnection. Who are you reconnecting with? You're reconnecting with yourself.
Wow.
And that is the model.
I love that. Look, would you give us a sketch of that model for the show notes to make sure
absolutely.
that
I can totally, you will have a whole graphic of that model.
That's
the whole, and my racialized healing is on top of that. I rewrote the model for race, for all people. It doesn't matter what your nationality is.
Yeah.
My Caucasian friends, you are on the cycle of violence of racial harm too. So if you want to break free, this is how you do it.
You know, I love it because you invite people. It's an invitation, is what I hear from you. It's not, let's go into the organization, guns blasting. You invite, and then you set up a framework for people who raise their hands, I want to move forward in life, who come forward and of course can benefit. I love that about you for sure. Yeah.
So thank
now,
you. There's more of us that want to.
Okay, indeed. Now, I want to move on, but before I move on to some other things I want to touch on, is there anything else about trauma and racial trauma that you want to put into the record before we kind of advance the ball a little bit more?
I would say that racialized trauma is really invisibilized. And I was used to it happening. I was used to ignoring it. I would say it didn't bother me, but we must be curious about how we're treated, how we're looked at, how we're ignored, how we're walked through on the sidewalk, how people don't wait on us. We matter. We all matter. And so it's important to know that you are loved. You always have been loved from the moment that you hit this earth, and that you deserve to be treated with love. Yeah. So that centering that healing in love is so vital.
I love it. And that's a higher level, the more spiritual. I'm going to talk to you about spirituality in more moment, but that takes us to that spiritual level to recognize that you're not just this body. You're much more than that. Deserving of love. I love that for sure. Okay, but now you have done so many other things, and I'm not sure if you're actively podcasting now, but I want people to find your podcast, because they are, look, your interviews knocked my socks off. So podcasting, it was so good. It is so good. And I will make sure that people are aware that you're out there. Tell us about your podcast and how can they find it?
You can find the podcast on Apple. You can find it on Spotify. It's out there. Love and Light, a guide to peace and oneness. And I'm not currently podcasting right now, but there's a bank of podcasts. I'm going to start up pretty soon with podcasting again. But I really wanted to share, much like yourself, like we're really in the same boat of sharing good stuff that was happening in the world, because I see dark things shared quite oftenly, and I didn't see enough light shared. So that's what I wanted to highlight. Like there's a lot of us light workers out here doing good work, and we need to know each other.
And so that explains the podcast title, Love and Light, because when I ask you, you just told us how you came to that. I love that. Love and light. Yes. Makes me smile. That's for sure. You can work to solve problems, but you can also build community among all people for sure. All right. Now, you are a playwright. Can you tell us about that, how you got into that, and what kinds of things are you sharing in the world?
I am. I am a playwright.
Okay.
I started writing when I was probably in the eighth grade, but my first play was um, produced in New York. It was a little play in a small theater there. And um, I find playwriting a way of expression of like what is going on in the world, what we're experiencing. And I say that I've produced here in Portland because of playwriting. I'm a filmmaker and I made my first film because of COVID. My play needed to be filmed. And that
Mm,
film is Be Careful What You Ask For, which is has been in film festivals, and it is a vehicle for opening up race relations and conversations.
uh-huh.
So it is a yeah, so that's my first
I,
film. I'm looking to do some more films coming up, but the plays that I write are, um, they're there to get you to think. And this particular play that turned into a film, it was it was based in memory of a man who was killed here by
mm,
the college police. And when I
mm,
heard of his death, something in me broke.
mm,
Mother of Black sons, and
mm,
as many deaths of Black men that have occurred in our country. I sat down at one time and wrote this piece that
mm.
is Be Careful What You Ask For.
Uh-huh. Wow. Good work for sure. Now, you embrace uh, this characteristic. I'm gonna put this on you of being a spiritual person. You don't shy away from that. And
No.
I think you've said in some places, as a spiritual person, that you have certain gifts. Can you enumerate two of those gifts for us?
Well, one of them is spiritual writing
Okay.
because Love and Light, the book um, is a spiritual writing.
Mm,
I am the writer. It came through me. It's not of
mm,
me. It's very clear in
mm.
that book. That is a
Okay.
spiritual writing.
Uh-huh.
And then I am also I'm a spiritual medium. So I am
Uh-huh.
guided by spiritual beings, people who have lived on this earth,
Mm.
Dr. King being one of them, who
Okay.
guide me in when I'm the work I have to do here on this earth.
Uh-huh. Now help us because some people, when they hear this, intuition and all of this, they may not immediately get it. So can you say more about being a spiritual, I lost my tongue, people. I
Yeah.
lost my tongue. But you get the point. Explain more about what you
I
mean here.
will. And I wasn't always a spiritual medium. Spiritual medium is someone who has contact with, there's only one world.
Mm,
So spirits or people who have crossed over, we're all in the same world. It's not two
uh-huh,
worlds. And I am able to have contact with people. I am trained.
uh-huh,
I am trained by not an instructor but a mentor to
mm.
be able to have contact with people who have crossed over.
Wow.
Do I do that? Do I hang a shingle for that? I don't
Uh-huh,
hang a shingle for that, but I have been influenced, guided, and directed by my mentors that
yeah.
who have crossed over, and Dr. King is one of them.
I believe it. I tell you, when I saw you doing your TEDx, you're the first person that I've ever interviewed, who does this work about healing racial trauma. But I'm telling you, something said immediately, you got to get her, you got to talk to her. I understand what you mean because when I saw your TEDx, when I saw your speech, something just came through me saying, you got to talk to her. And you're the first person who does this work of racial healing that I've ever talked to. Is that a kind of what you're talking about? Something kind of flows through you?
Absolutely. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of us have it,
Mm,
and our world diminishes it, right? If you
mm,
think about all of the mystics throughout history who have been,
mm.
downplayed, but really we all have this gift or intuition or that
Yeah.
voice that comes from nowhere. And we're like,
Uh,
oh, right.
yeah.
Yes, that's what I'm talking
No,
about.
so the first time you had that experience, of you really experienced, that you're getting guidance from elsewhere. Was it scary for you? Were you intimidated by it, or?
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely. And what happened
okay.
with me is that I lost a dear friend and
Oh.
she had taken her life. And I
Mm,
woke up in the middle of the night and I saw
mhm,
someone standing in the room and I thought it was my spouse. And
mhm,
then when I looked up again, pew, out of the room, and I said, well, I wonder where they're going. They're so
mm,
quickly. They passed the
mm,
bathroom and it just felt strange. But then when I put my hand
mm,
over, my spouse was in bed, and actually so
mm,
was our son.
uh-huh.
And he was little at that time. And I was like, oh, who was that?
Yeah.
And then I asked a person who was an intuitive. I told her the whole story, and I felt
Mm,
before my friend passed away, I felt like something bad was going to happen.
mhm,
And when she passed away, I thought, like, what could I have done? And my friend
mhm,
told me, my friend now, who is a intuitive, said, when the soul is ready to go, there's nothing you can do,
mhm,
and there's
mhm,
nothing you could have done. And I said, what if I have this feeling again, like this strong feeling? Sometimes I have those. And she told me to sit down, get a pen and paper, to ground myself and
mhm,
to write my question on the paper. I said, well, that's not going
mhm,
to work.
mhm.
I don't know what that is. Well, I did that. And then what came into my head was my friend gave me a message that was her.
Wow.
She's sorry
Wow.
she scared me.
Uh-huh.
And then I got to hear some of what her experience was.
Wow. Mm. Whew, that's profound.
And that
There's
was the
something
beginning.
else. Yeah, I got you. That's amazing. Okay, let me catch my breath here. But there's a couple, two more things here. But there's something else that you've shared. Now I don't know what it means, but when I read the phrase, short phrase, it resonated with me. I said, "Oh, that's right." There's this, but I'm gonna say what it is. Then I want you to expound on it a little bit so that we all can understand what you mean by it. You said, you used the phrase, the intersectionality of humankind. And once again, when I saw that, I just took it out of context now. When I saw that, I knew that something was right about that, but I didn't know what what it meant. So educate me, and I'm sure other people will want to know as well.
Thank you. I mean, great question. Thank you for bringing it up. What I found in my journey of trying to get to know who I am and also trying to do the work and using the intention to do the work of what I've come here to do is that I realized that I was a spiritual being having a human experience,
Mm,
not a human being having a spiritual experience, and that I've come here to do something, and that um, I want to do whatever that is. I know it's good work, but I
mm,
have to also lean on the spiritual side of me to
mm.
be able to do that. I want to coexist with the human and the spiritual as one.
Uh-huh. Wow, I love that. And that opportunity exists for all of us, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh. Yeah. We've mentioned your book before, not the one that's coming out, but the one that's out now, Love of Light, A Guide to Peace and Oneness. Can you share a little more about what you try to do in this book?
This book is a friend of mine said this book is a gift to the world. It
Mm,
is um it is a book for those who are not going to any kind of religion, who think they believe and maybe something is bigger than them, but they don't really know that they're lost in this world of constant movement, constant uh all of the things that are not of the light, right? And so, you know, and what this book does is it guides you to a practice
mm,
of getting to know who you are,
mm,
period. and it
Yeah.
guides you into being able to sit and have your mind be still. And at the
Wow.
end of the book, it suggests that you do this in community, that you find community.
Yeah.
It
I
has
love that.
prayers in it. There's beautiful
Mm,
prayers in it. Prayers
mm,
from all over. I wrote some of the prayers from other people. And
mm,
but I could say like the one, I mean, it's this caveat for anyone who's listening. The At the very beginning of the book, what it talks about is stopping judgment.
mm. Whew, that's good. Judgment of yourself and also judgment of others, or just judgment of your
Judgment, period. It always starts
mm,
with self, because when we're judging, we're
yeah.
really just judging ourselves. But that
Mm,
harsh judgment, and the example it gives of when someone cuts in front of you, instead of yelling and shaking your fist at them, why not be happy you didn't get hurt, they didn't get hurt?
mm,
Why not bless them?
ah, wow. That's powerful. Yeah. So you know, I always come up with a title for my show. And when I started this, I thought of, and I'm going to talk about this openly, so people can hear this. We'll talk with you about this, get your ideas. And when I started this conversation, I thought I'll call this show "Healing Racial Trauma" with Dr. Lisa Collins, and which is a fine title. As I approach the end, I'm wondering, is the intersectionality of humankind a more appropriate title? I don't know. What do you think? What do you think? Yes.
I think some people are probably afraid of the word intersectionality
Okay.
because it's associated with critical race theory
Uh-huh.
and Dr. Collins and Dr. Crenshaw. I think I think this show, what we've talked about is we've talked about healing, and we've
Mm,
talked about self-care and wellness and community.
mm,
We've talked about how do we huddle together to take care
yeah,
of ourselves with racial trauma, with childhood trauma. How do we touch into spirituality? How do we develop what that looks like for us? It may not look the same for you as it does for me,
yeah.
but how do I
Hmm.
continue to seek? And the only thing that we really need to do is care for one another. And how do we do
Yeah.
that?
Hmm. I love that. And that's, I mean, that's, let's not underestimate the benefit of relationships and a community. That's great. Well, Dr. Collins, it has been a wonderful pleasure
It has
to
been a
sit with
joy.
you, yeah, and talk to you. So thank you so
I
much,
feel
ma'am.
I feel very, very grateful, again, grateful, and that now I have you in my community.
Aha. Well, I'm glad we were connected as well. Well, there you have it, everyone. You've been listening to the Possibility Action Network podcast. Our guest today has been Dr. Lisa Collins. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton. Until next time, good day.
You are not alone. Just keep on, keep on, keep on going. Just press on, press on, press on.